All right, let's dive right into the incredibly complex and, frankly, dangerous situation between the US and Iran. We're going to be looking at some expert analysis that's been modeling this exact conflict for, get this, over 2 decades. And trust me, the conclusion is probably not what you're thinking. So, this quote really gets to the heart of the paradox we're unpacking today. It's from Professor Robert Pape, and his military and political model has been predicting this outcome for 21 years. Think about that. The very actions that were supposed to cripple Iran, well, they've actually made it stronger, more confident. I mean, how does that even happen? The world's most powerful military attacks a country, and that country ends up stronger? It just seems completely backward, right? Well, the answer, it turns out, goes all the way back to a fundamental misunderstanding of the whole situation from day one. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we need to talk about something the analysis calls the bombing paradox. This is the core mistake, the one that really kicked off this whole chain of events. See, the entire American strategy was built on one big, flawed assumption. The thinking was that Iran was basically a paper tiger, right? That it was already beaten down and would just crumble with one more good push. But the reality? On the ground? Totally different story. So, to really explain why the bombing was doomed from the start, Professor Pape uses this fantastic analogy. Think about panning for gold. You've got the pan, right? That represents the big industrial facilities, the centrifuge plants, the stuff you can see. But the real prize, the gold, is the enriched uranium itself. That's the stuff that actually matters. And here's the thing, US bombers were amazing at destroying the pan. I mean, they flattened the buildings, the visible infrastructure, no problem. But you can't just bomb the gold into oblivion. The enriched material, the actual core of their nuclear program, just got buried under all the rubble. Or even worse, it had already been moved to super deep secret locations. So the real threat, it was never ever eliminated. So you think this failure might lead to a rethink, right? A de-escalation? Nope. Instead, it pushed the US straight into a very predictable, step-by-step process that the model calls the escalation trap. So let's break down how this trap actually works. It's pretty straightforward and pretty scary. Step 1 is the bombing we just talked about, which, remember, just makes Iran's regime stronger. That then emboldens them to go to step 2. They retaliate, but not with a direct fight. They seize the Strait of Hormuz, a huge choke point for global oil, and that immediately forces the US into the dreaded step 3, realizing that the only way to get the strait back is to think about a ground invasion. See how each step just leads to worse and worse options? Okay, but why does Iran think it can get away with this? Well, it's because they've basically seen this movie before. Think back to Vietnam. American air power was absolutely devastating, but it could never get that last 15 or 20% of the supply lines. The enemy knew the US couldn't eliminate everything, and knowing that just energized their morale. Well, Iran is in the exact same spot. They know we can't get to their deeply buried stuff, and that gives them all the confidence in the world to keep pushing back. So this whole escalation trap has brought us to a really critical moment, a point of no return. There is no going back to how things were. The US is now staring at a massive fork in the road with two very different and very bad paths forward. And let me tell you, these options are stark. Path A, a ground war. We're talking a minimum of 6 months, politically devastating because of casualties and a real risk of that we can't back down now mentality that traps you in a forever war. Then there's Path B, basically just let Iran win. That means accepting them as the top dog in the Persian Gulf, probably with nukes within a year, and watching a whole new anti-US alliance form. Not great. And we have to be clear about this. This isn't just some regional squabble. Make no mistake, the outcome here is actively reshaping alliances and shifting the entire global balance of power as we speak. And to really wrap your head around the global stakes here, we just need to focus on one number: 31%. So what's so special about 31%? Well, that's the combined slice of the world's oil supply that Iran and Russia control. If they team up, they could literally weaponize that supply against the US and Europe. We're talking about taking nearly a third of the world's oil right off the market. The economic fallout from that would be, well, you can imagine. And this is what that new world looks like visually. For decades, it's been the US on top, no question. A China-Russia alliance? Okay, that's already a serious challenge. But then you add a newly empowered, probably nuclear Iran into that mix. For the first time, you're looking at a world where the scales of power could genuinely, truly tip away from the United States. Okay, so if the options are this bad, you're probably thinking, why not just talk? Find a diplomatic solution. Well, the analysis is pretty clear on this. There is no easy way out. And a big part of that is because of the human element and how dug in both sides have become. I mean, just look at the rhetoric from the US side. This post from the president, it's just on another level. According to the analysis, you just don't see this. No American president has ever made such a direct, public threat to, well, to end an entire civilization. It's truly unprecedented. So what's the effect of a threat like that on the ground in Iran? Does it make people want to overthrow their government? Not at all. We have this message here from an ordinary citizen, and what they're saying is that instead of driving a wedge between the people and the regime, these kinds of threats do the exact opposite. They just rally everyone together against the outside enemy. Any hope for a homegrown pro-democracy movement? It gets pushed miles and miles away.
And what about that peace deal? Iran actually did put a 10-point plan on the table. But when you really read it, the demands for reparations, the right to enrich uranium, control over the strait, this isn't a surrender proposal. Not even close. This is a list of demands from a country that knows it's in a position of strength. They're basically asking the US to officially recognize them as a new world power.
So this is where we are. We're stuck. And it's not a stable situation. It's this incredibly dangerous cycle, just bouncing back and forth between two awful futures. On one hand, you have the slow, grinding preparations for a ground war. And on the other, you have the steady rise of an emboldened, nuclear-armed Iran. Back and forth. Back and forth. And all of this leaves us with one last, really haunting question. When you're a superpower and you've walked yourself right into a trap you built, where every single path forward leads to some kind of disaster, how do you even begin to choose which way to go?